It's the late afternoon of July 2nd, 1942. Aboard his flagship, Captain Jack Broome peers through binoculars at the grey Arctic horizon, his breath fogging in the cold. The sea is calm, deceptively so. For days, PQ-17 has steamed eastward, 37 merchant ships in tight formation, surrounded by a screen of British and American warships. But Broome feels it in his bones. Something is coming. A sudden call crackles through the radio room. An enemy bomber has been spotted. Within minutes, the shriek of diving aircraft fills the air. The men rush to action stations. Broome watches as the first bombs fall. They miss, but only just. Columns of water rise around the merchant ships. His worst fears are confirmed. This is the opening move. The Luftwaffe is here, and the Wolfpack won't be far behind. As the echoes of the explosions fade, Broome steels himself. He doesn't yet know it, but the Admiralty is about to give an order that will unravel everything he's fought to protect. The real disaster is only hours away. In the summer of 1942, Axis forces reached the peak of their military success. In the east, German armies advanced toward the Caucasus oil fields, while in North Africa, Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps captured Tobruk, forcing the British Eighth Army into retreat. The collapse of this long-held fortress alarmed the British High Command. Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union had drawn Britain into an uneasy alliance with Stalin's regime. Churchill, despite his deep mistrust of communism, recognized that Soviet resistance tied down millions of German troops. To sustain their war effort, however, the Soviets needed massive quantities of Allied aid, trucks, tanks, aircraft, and raw materials. The Western Allies responded with an ambitious Arctic supply effort. Soviet merchant shipping lacked the capacity, so Britain and the US launched the PQ convoys. Merchant fleets escorted across treacherous Arctic waters to Murmansk and Archangel. The first convoy sailed in August 1941. By February 1942, 12 had followed, delivering essential supplies aboard 93 ships, with only one loss to a U-boat attack. The cargoes were substantial. Over 750 tanks, 800 aircraft, and 2,300 trucks had already been delivered, along with more than 100,000 tons of munitions, fuel, and food. These shipments played a critical role in sustaining Soviet defenses, including the counteroffensive at Moscow. German naval forces had initially paid little attention, focused instead on the Atlantic. But British commando raids, like those on the Lofoten Islands and at Spitsbergen, stirred fears of an Allied invasion of Norway. Hitler ordered the deployment of Tirpitz to Trondheim to deter such an attack. As the sister ship to the Bismarck, Tirpitz alone threatened the entire Arctic supply route. To reinforce her, the Kriegsmarine executed Operation Cerberus, the famous Channel Dash. Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prince Eugen broke out of Brest in February and reached German waters, though not without cost. Gneisenau struck mines and Prince Eugen suffered steering damage, necessitating repairs in Kiel. Meanwhile, the German Navy and Luftwaffe increased their Arctic presence. Over 260 aircraft and 30 U-boats were deployed along likely convoy routes. Sailors began referring to this submarine wolfpack as the Eisteufel, Ice Devils. Convoys PQ-13 through PQ-15 suffered growing losses from air and submarine attacks, raising doubts about the route's sustainability. At the Admiralty, debate intensified. The convoys were strategically vital, but politically indispensable. Admiral Dudley Pound, First Sea Lord, feared that any pause in aid could push Stalin toward a separate peace with Hitler, a scenario Churchill considered catastrophic. Thus, the convoys continued. In May, PQ-16 departed with 35 merchant ships. Near Bear Island, it came under intense air attack. 6 vessels were lost, marking one of the costliest single convoy actions to date. The German naval staff took this as confirmation that the Arctic route could be broken, if they acted with overwhelming force. This led to Operation Rosselsprung, a bold plan to unleash Germany's surface fleet on a major convoy. When intelligence confirmed a large convoy forming in Iceland, orders were issued. Convoy PQ-17 was among the most valuable convoys yet assembled. On June 27th, it departed Hvalfjordur, Iceland, bound for Arkhangelsk. 37 merchant ships, most of them American, carried over $700 million worth of war material, including 300 aircraft, 600 tanks, and 4,000 trucks, enough to equip 50,000 troops. The convoy's close escort, under Royal Navy officer John Broome, included 6 destroyers and 15 smaller vessels. In support, Admiral Sir John Tovey's powerful home fleet trailed the convoy by 200 miles. It included HMS Duke of York, USS Washington, HMS Victorious, and heavy cruisers Nigeria and Cumberland, with 14 destroyers. A support force under Rear Admiral Hamilton operated nearby with HMS London, Norfolk, and US cruisers Tuscaloosa and Wichita. Yet unbeknownst to the Allies, their every move was being tracked. A German U-boat lurking in the Arctic waters spotted the departing fleet and immediately transmitted a sighting report back to Kiel. This single report set off a chain reaction within the German command structure, confirming to the Kriegsmarine that a major convoy was in motion and that the Royal Navy was preparing to protect it. German command fell to Admiral Rolf Karls and Admiral Hubert Schmundt in Narvik. With partial decrypts of British codes and steady U-boat tracking, the Germans were confident they could intercept the convoy. Their strike force was split in two. Force 1, under Admiral Otto Schneewind, included Tirpitz and Admiral Hipper. Force 2, led by Vice Admiral Oskar Kummitz, comprised heavy cruisers Lutzow and Admiral Scheer, along with supporting destroyers and torpedo boats. While the German surface fleet was preparing its ambush, Admiral Hubert Schmundt at Narvik had already positioned a deadly force beneath and above the waves. 9 U-boats were assigned to patrol the Barents Sea for PQ-17. These submarines were deployed in loose patrol lines north of Norway and west of Novaya Zemlya, ordered to wait for the convoy to scatter. Above them, Colonel General Hans-Jürgen Stumpf's Luftflotte 5 committed over 120 strike aircraft, including Junkers from KG-30 and Heinkel torpedo bombers from KG-26. These aircraft acted as both forward scouts and strike assets, conducting round-the-clock reconnaissance and guiding submarines to isolated targets once the convoy broke apart. It was the first time such close U-boat air coordination had been attempted in Arctic waters on this scale. But the German plan quickly faltered. Lutzow ran aground en route to Altenfjord and was forced to withdraw. Then, as Tirpitz and Hipper arrived at the fjord, 3 escort destroyers struck submerged rocks and were disabled. Within 48 hours, 4 key ships were out of action, crippling the planned surface assault before it began. On July 1st, a Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft, a Junker from KG-406, finally located Convoy PQ-17 south of Spitsbergen. The Germans had been searching for days, and this confirmed sighting allowed Operation Rosselsprung to be formally activated. However, the surface fleet remained in port, still awaiting Hitler's final approval to sail. Meanwhile, British aerial reconnaissance returned that evening with alarming news. The berths at Trondheim and Narvik appeared empty. To the Admiralty, this suggested that the Kriegsmarine's most powerful surface vessels, Tirpitz, Admiral Scheer, Admiral Hipper, and Lutzow, had put to sea. Though the ships were in fact in Altenfjord, and at this stage it was very much the question whether they would be used, Admiral Dudley Pound interpreted the aerial photographs as confirmation of a major German sortie. He immediately alerted Admiral Tovey, warning that an attack on PQ-17 might be imminent. Tovey reacted swiftly. The home fleet altered course northeast toward Bear Island, seeking to position itself between the convoy and the presumed German force. Rear Admiral Hamilton's cruiser group also shifted southward to widen the defensive screen. At this point, British naval doctrine dictated that capital ships should not advance east of Bear Island due to the risk of Luftwaffe air attack from bases in northern Norway. Instead, the Royal Navy relied on a forward line of British and Soviet submarines, pre-positioned to detect or intercept any breakout from Altenfjord. Despite British alarm, German naval commander Admiral Rolf Karls remained hesitant. Although the Luftwaffe had now confirmed PQ-17's location, Karls still lacked critical intelligence about the whereabouts of Tovey's home fleet. Without that knowledge, any German sortie risked running into a superior British battle group, an encounter that could prove disastrous. The memory of Bismarck's destruction in May 1941 still weighed heavily on both Karls and Hitler, who remained unwilling to risk the Tirpitz in open battle. On July 2nd, probing German attacks began. Luftwaffe bombers launched scattered raids while U-456 fired a spread of torpedoes at a suspected target, possibly the British cruiser Trinidad, but missed. Convoy escorts responded vigorously. Anti-aircraft gunners disrupted dive-bombing runs, and destroyers dropped depth charges on sonar contacts. Though no major damage was done, the Allies were now under sustained pressure. That same day, however, confusion deepened. A U-boat, likely U-703, mistakenly reported that Hamilton's cruiser group was accompanied by British battleships, suggesting that the Royal Navy might be preparing an ambush. Admiral Karls, alarmed by this possibility, temporarily suspended Operation Rosselsprung and requested further reconnaissance before allowing Tirpitz or Hipper to sail. The opportunity to strike was slipping away, but the Germans did not yet realize that the British were equally uncertain. By the evening of July 3rd, Luftwaffe reconnaissance had intensified, and U-703 was still transmitting regular updates on the convoy's speed and position. The Germans now had near-continuous contact with the convoy, but remained reluctant to commit their surface fleet. The British, for their part, had no knowledge of the delays inside the German High Command, nor of Hitler's hesitation. As time ran short and the convoy moved out of range of immediate air cover, Colonel General Hans-Jürgen Stumpf of the Luftwaffe's 5th Air Force authorized an air attack on the convoy. His bombers launched their assault, but the convoy's gunners put up fierce resistance. The defensive fire from the convoy caused significant disruption. Many of the Junkers were unable to dive effectively, their pilots forced to break off their attacks due to the anti-aircraft fire. Nonetheless, the German air assault was not without consequence. Their first victim was the William Hooper, a US Liberty ship loaded with war supplies. Bombs tore into her engine room. She quickly caught fire and sank with heavy loss of life. Moments later, Honomu was damaged in a separate bombing run, and Rathlin took a hit near her machinery spaces, though she stayed afloat. Amidst the chaos, rescue efforts were swiftly initiated as the convoy tried to press on as fast as possible. These were not the first attacks the convoy had endured, but they were the most serious yet, and they shattered what little confidence remained at the Admiralty. Later intelligence reports, based on misidentified U-boat sightings and the disappearance of Tirpitz from aerial surveillance, convinced the Admiralty that a surface strike was imminent. Then, at 9:11 p.m., the convoy received 3 telegrams in rapid succession from Admiral Dudley Pound, the head of the British Admiralty, instructing the convoy to disperse. The British Admiralty, operating with an incomplete intelligence picture, had no knowledge of the convoy's actual situation. Their decision was based on the assumption that a German surface fleet was nearby and posed an imminent threat to the convoy. The convoy, which had originally been a cohesive unit, now turned into a collection of isolated ships. Meanwhile, the actual German high seas fleet remained at anchor in Altenfjord, awaiting authorization for departure. As the night unfolded, the German U-boats and aircraft had a front-row seat to a drama that was almost too good to be true. Schmundt reported in his war diary that the British order to scatter was unexpected and highly advantageous. Radio intercepts confirmed the dispersal, and Schmundt immediately instructed all forces to act with utmost aggression. He later noted that the British decision was the best that could have happened and ordered unrestricted attacks from all available submarines and bombers. By dawn on July 5th, 6 U-boats were maneuvering independently against scattered targets across a wide swath of the Barents Sea. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe bomber formations continued to patrol overhead. KG-30's Junker squadrons and KG-26's Heinkels flew overlapping sorties throughout the day and into the night, reporting convoy positions via wireless. The hunt for the remaining targets was now in full swing, with the submarines taking advantage of the convoy's disarray to hunt down the isolated ships one by one. July 5th saw the consequences of the scatter order unfold. The Liberty ship Christopher Newport had been crippled the previous morning by a torpedo from a Heinkel He 115 launched by Küstenfliegergruppe 906. The strike flooded her engine room and left her adrift. She was taken in tow by the rescue vessel Zamalek, but at 8:08, U-457 fired a second torpedo that sealed her fate. After the crew abandoned ship, she was scuttled by the corvette HMS Poppy to prevent capture. From above, the Luftwaffe descended with impunity. With the convoy scattered, the coordinated anti-aircraft umbrella no longer existed. The merchantmen had only their own deck guns and luck. Waves of Junkers and Heinkel planes spotted easy prey. The British freighter Navarino, laden with munitions, took a direct hit. Flames engulfed her hold, and seconds later she exploded in a spectacular fireball that tore her apart. Her stern lifted briefly before she vanished beneath the waves. The Soviet tanker Azerbaijan also took a hit from a German bomber, but her crew, trained in damage control, fought to keep her afloat. Despite heavy flooding, she limped toward the Novaya Zemlya coast. Her decks scarred, but her cargo intact. She would be one of the rare survivors. The attack on Azerbaijan was conducted by Junkers of KG-30. The tanker's cargo of fuel made her an especially dangerous vessel to keep afloat, but Soviet sailors contained the fires. Elsewhere, the American freighter Peter Kerr, carrying tanks destined for the Eastern Front, came under sustained attack from Junkers. A bomb struck amidships, and fire spread through her cargo decks. She sank slowly, giving her crew just enough time to abandon ship. Few lifeboats stayed upright in the crashing waves. Later that afternoon, the Washington, another Liberty ship, was hit by 2 bombs. The first destroyed her bridge. The second struck the engine room. She sank in less than 10 minutes. Pan Atlantic was struck as well, and suffered similar damage. Her crew were forced to jump into the sea as fire engulfed the stern. German submarines pressed the attack. U-255 located and torpedoed the Alcoa Ranger. The strike broke her back, and she went under in under 4 minutes. The Earlston, a British freighter armed with a barrage balloon, was bombed during daylight hours. The balloon, meant to deter dive bombers, did little to stop the attackers. One bomb struck the engine room, setting off a chain of fires. Her crew abandoned ship, but even in the lifeboats they were not safe. German aircraft returned to strafe the survivors, leaving several men dead and others wounded, floating in the freezing sea. Amidst the destruction, stories of resistance and bravery emerged. The rescue ship Zamalek maneuvered between burning wrecks, hauling shivering sailors from oil-slicked water. The corvette Poppy, ignoring orders to retreat, reappeared in the chaos, chasing off a submarine with a hasty depth charge attack. But these were small flashes of light in an otherwise dark night. And yet, the mighty Tirpitz never sailed. Despite being ready and fueled, her sortie was first delayed by intelligence confusion and then cancelled altogether. Grand Admiral Raeder, wary of a trap, feared that British battleships might be lurking just beyond radar range. By the evening of July 5th, intercepted British signals confirmed that heavy ships were at sea, possibly en route to intercept. Whether accurate or not, the report prompted Raeder to halt Operation Rosselsprung entirely. Tirpitz, Admiral Hipper and Admiral Scheer remained in their fjords, never firing a shot. Raeder noted in post-war interviews that Hitler's personal anxiety over losing capital ships after Bismarck heavily influenced the decision to keep the fleet in harbour. By the morning of July 6th, the German command was in jubilant mood. From Narvik to Berlin, commanders received updates reporting success after success. Convoy PQ-17 had dissolved into scattered fragments, and each hour brought news of more sinkings. From their perches in the air and from the depths below, the Luftwaffe and the Kriegsmarine hunted at will. The attacks lasted for 3 harrowing days. As the convoy's survivors continued to struggle, many of the remaining ships were rerouted in an attempt to avoid further German assaults. Air raids on Murmansk further complicated the situation, leading to more rerouting. On July 7th, the German submarines claimed more kills. The Husia was bombed and sunk by aircraft, while the Ironclad, though not directly attacked, was grounded by her crew on the Novaya Zemlya coast to avoid destruction. The sea was now thick with oil slicks, lifeboats and broken timber. Radio signals from merchantmen grew fewer by the hour. Many of the survivors found their way to Matoshkin Strait or Soviet-controlled islands, where rescue crews waited. Others died alone, their ships swallowed by the cold. The losses suffered by the convoy were staggering. 14 vessels sank the day after the convoy scattered, and 7 more were lost in the following 5 days. In total, 24 merchant ships were destroyed, totaling 142,695 tons of shipping. The material losses included over 3,350 vehicles, 210 aircraft, 430 tanks, and more than 100,000 tons of war supplies. These losses were not just in terms of material, but in the lives of those who perished aboard the sinking ships, further compounding the tragedy of the mission. Only 11 vessels from the original convoy managed to reach the Soviet Union. 9 reached Arkhangelsk and 2 Murmansk, and even they arrived severely depleted, carrying only a fraction of the supplies they had originally intended to deliver. The grueling ordeal finally came to an end with the arrival of the last ships over 3 weeks after their departure from Hvalfjordur, Iceland. The destruction of Convoy PQ-17 sent shockwaves through the Allied High Command. Never before had a single convoy suffered such devastating losses in so short a time. What was meant to be a vital lifeline to the Soviet Union had become a bitter lesson in the perils of miscommunication, overcautious command, and fragmented doctrine. In London, the Admiralty faced sharp criticism. Admiral Dudley Pound's decision to scatter the convoy, made with the best of intentions but based on faulty intelligence, would haunt him for the rest of his career. Within days, Allied leaders were forced to confront the reality that even the most carefully escorted convoys could be undone by hesitation and poor coordination. The press and public were never told the full story, but inside the war rooms of London and Washington, the name PQ-17 became synonymous with catastrophe. In Berlin, the German High Command celebrated what they viewed as a rare naval triumph. The Kriegsmarine, long overshadowed by the U-boat war in the Atlantic, had finally played a central role in a major victory. And, for the Luftwaffe's bomber squadrons, PQ-17 was proof that persistence and Arctic adaptation could yield results. But even in victory, a strategic gap remained. The mighty Tirpitz had still not fired a shot in anger. Her psychological weight had paralyzed the British, but her absence on the battlefield remained a silent reminder of what Germany dared not risk. For the Soviet Union, the loss of PQ-17 was a serious blow, but not a fatal one. Supplies still trickled in through the Arctic, Persian Gulf, and Pacific routes. But trust in Western reliability had taken a hit. Stalin, ever suspicious, saw in the disaster further proof of Allied hesitancy. His demands for a second front grew louder, and yet the story of the Arctic convoys was far from over. While PQ-17 marked a low point, it was not the final word. New strategies would emerge, risks would be weighed again, and from the ashes of this disaster, the Allies would be forced to rethink how best to deliver aid to the East, because the war was far from won and winter was coming. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.